The Australian transfer window is open. Time to throw out the old and bring in the new, as A-League teams are set to do battle off the field as they vie for some of the hottest signatures in town. Plenty have already been done on day one. Well, in all reality, they've probably been done for a while. At least now we can talk about them. None more so than Mitch Langerak, as we will finally be able to answer the question of who starts in goals for the Victory. The Glory are set to bring in 5 players to try and turn their season around, whilst the Bulls are set to record a substantial fee for a player with less than a dozen A-League appearances. There were 2 games on in midweek, one significantly more exciting than the other. CEO of Brisbane Roar, Kaz Patafta, backs Ruben Zadkovic significantly less than last week, and is Ben Garuccio the Trent Alexander-Arnold of the A-League in this episode of the Round Ball Australia podcast. My name is Lachlan, Avil, fresh off a lovely victory this morning in the North London derby. Jacob and I are very happy. We've kicked out all the non-Arsenal supporters tonight. It's just you and me. Yeah, just to bask in the glory of a red North London.
Keep it as an echo chamber because we all know which is the biggest club in London. But no, it was a good way to start the day. I had my doubts heading into it, so no, good to get that result, and happy about it. But we're here to talk A-League, so we've got a lot to talk about as well.
One last shout out, because a friend of the show, of course, Antonis Pagonis, was at the ground at the Emirates Stadium. He planned a lot of his European holiday around getting a ticket to that game. Antonis, I hope you had a good time. But to bring it to the A-League, which is why we're here, the other question I had for you right off the top is, what was the most peak A-League of the Perth Western City Wanderers game? Was it Tomislav Marcella coming off a brilliant win 1-0 against Auckland, conceding the most ridiculous of own goals? I know he wasn't the last touch, but it was his error, his slip, to concede the own goal within 4 minutes, or the sprinklers turning on halfway through the second half?
I think it's got to be the sprinklers, right? I mean, that's the sort of thing that doesn't even happen at like Sunday league grounds. I mean, that's so, how does that happen?
Probably because at Sunday league grounds, someone actually has to physically turn them on. You can't mess up the timer.
That's just, I've always wondered, I'm always like, I wonder if, what would happen if they just turned on during the game. And it's like, and now I don't have to wonder that because it's happened and we've seen it. But that was, just topped it off. And I mean, it sort of matched the game really, right? And it was just all sorts was happening. It was a bit unpredictable. You mentioned that Tommy Marcella just sort of, I don't really know what to call it.
He just slips over.
Blunder, and like, it's just one of those games. But for Perth, kind of a bit disappointing, right? Because they had all that momentum from last week. They beat Auckland, and it was actually a pretty resolute display from them as well to then come here. And, Ollie Sale will be one as well that particularly will feel it, because he's just worked so hard in that last week to gain back the trust of the fans with his performance against Auckland, and then almost sort of not throws it away, but just lets it slip again.
It was pretty poor for the second one, wasn't it?
He should have done a hell of a lot better than he did. And, it just sort of feels like for Perth, like just they just can't do it, right? Like they managed to get it against Auckland, but it's these games like this that sort of you can really understand where a lot of their troubles are lying in, right? Which is just doing the basics right and getting the fundamentals correct. They've just not been able to do that this season. So it's really disappointing for them, because I think we all thought that maybe they'd try and turn a corner after that Auckland win and go on with their form and put on another couple of teams to the sword. But perhaps that's not the case,
I did like one of Andy Harper's lines on commentary, though, is that the last couple of weeks, they've looked like a football team, They played a football match. Like, they were well in this. They had chances in the second half. They very easily could have got something out of it. And, you have to wonder where Ollie Sale's head's at, because, the first part of the season, he's not doing a whole lot wrong, right? No. He's just conceding lots of chances because the team around him isn't amazing. Maybe he feels like he just has to do something extra because just being regular wasn't working. So that's why he's coming out early and he's getting his lines a little bit wrong. I don't know, but it can't be an easy situation to be in. But they were in this, Perth. And of course, we're talking about the transfer window, and that's going to be a lot of our conversation, not just today, but in the coming month as well. But we do know that Perth are going to be a big mover. in that respect. As we're sitting here on Thursday night, we're only a few hours into the official transfer window, but Perth already look like one of the big movers. Stan Lazaridis has said there will be 5 additions to the club. 3 of them we already know for sure. Lachie Wales we saw in glory gear on Tuesday night.
Yeah.
That deal is now official. He's returning from Korea, I think. So obviously
Mm-hmm.
a championship winner with Western United. He will be joining Perth Glory. And then a Japanese defensive pair of Yuto Masao and Takuya Okamoto. 600 appearances between the two of them across J1 and 2. So that's a bit of good caliber. And of course, a defensive pair. That's what Perth Glory need, right? They need some really solid defenders to be able to keep balls out of their own net.
I think that they've done a pretty good job here already right at the opening of the window, right? They've got these 2 experienced players coming in a position really of need. They've got Lachie Wales in, who's, a good known quantity, A-League caliber player, plug and play sort of guy that you can bring into the squad. So it does seem like, and we were sort of alluding to it, right, with the contract terminations and things that the Glory have done, is that they've had a plan in place for a long time in terms of what they're going to set out to do when the window opens. And it seems like that plan might stretch back even further, considering the fact that these deals have been confirmed on the day that the window has opened, which would mean that presumably they've been in talks for a long time before that. So no, I mean, that's a little bit of a silver lining for Glory fans, right? Is that at least it seems like that front office staff and the ownership and stuff, they seem to be on top of it and at least have some semblance of a plan in how to deal with some of these issues in terms of squad building and composition and on the field stuff. So no, it looks like a good piece of business. Obviously, as with any transfers, they could just not pan out and they could be awful. That's the risk that you take, especially when you're the A-League. It's such a unique place, and we're always hearing about international transfers, talking about it, right? It's not just, yes, it's hot here because it's the middle of summer, but the style of play is slightly different. The pitches are a lot harder. There's a lot more to get used to than moving between European leagues or Asian leagues or whatever. So those are factors that come into play as well. But it seems like Glory have done a decent job so far already.
Of course, like you only have to look at Perth Glory's off-season signings, like Louis Kanga, Caicedo, right? The 2 of the players that are out the door already, just to know how difficult that can be sometimes. So, as always, the proof is in the pudding. The other name that we've heard, Channel 10 reported this, Sydney FC's Pat Wood, per Marco Monteverde through News Corp. That is a loan deal, which I think is interesting because Sydney FC are one of the clubs that, more than most other sides in the league, have actually used outgoing loans pretty well. Adrian Segacic is a very, very good example. He went overseas. Was it to the Netherlands? I'm tempted to say.
So. I believe so.
The second division over there. And look at how he's performed. He just got a hat-trick the other week, so that proves my point very nicely. But it's a perfect situation. You got obviously Patrick Klimala, who's scoring lots of goals. We saw that when he was injured, Joe Lolly came across into the inside. And should have had a first half hat trick, right? I think the third one was really close. And, they've still got the likes of Jaden Kaczarski there as well as a third kind of cover. So what's Pat Wood going to do? So I think good move for him. He's going to get some match minutes and good for the club because at least there's a really talented player, not just sitting on the bench doing nothing, right?
Yeah, spot on. I think it's something that A-League clubs aren't doing enough in terms of when you've got players that, I don't want to say are rotting on the bench or anything like that, right? Because that's quite dramatic. But that perhaps aren't getting enough minutes. Just loan them. It's what every club in the world does: is loan players out if they know they're not going to get minutes and they need them for their development. But it seems like A-League clubs are still a little bit resistant to that. And I don't know if that's maybe the fear that I don't know. Just spitballing here, but this player gets an experience overseas and goes, oh well, now I don't ever want to go back to Australia, sort of thing. If that's a worry, but it's good to see Sydney leading the way with that. Obviously, one of the bigger clubs in the league, so you'd hope that their connections and their networks are probably a lot bigger than some of the other clubs, which would help things out there. But no, it's definitely a good thing, and even here, this is within the A-League itself, loaning it out. What we see a lot of teams do is if a player wants to, leave or they want to go to another club or whatever, they just some mutual termination, right? And then, the club loses potentially a talented player. Whereas this seems like a nice middle ground. Obviously, it seems like Pat Wood does still want to stay at Sydney, but he's realistic about the fact that I'm not going to get many minutes here. Sydney have gone and recognised the same and said, hey, look, this is beneficial for everybody. Perth get you're a quality player. You get minutes to develop, and we get you back in, a few months' time.
And take some points off our competition, please.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. So, no, it's a smart move from Sydney, and I'd like to see more clubs starting to embrace that sort of thing because, even for then, from Perth side of things, right, from these teams that perhaps are struggling a little bit and they don't have the reach or the money to go out and get players in the transfer market, interleague loans, right? Like you can just look at other teams around the competition, and there are plenty of sides who have really, really good players that aren't getting minutes. And you go, well, what's the worst that can happen is at least try and get him on loan, So yeah, hopefully it's something we see more of, because while I know people talk about, it's this recycling league, players just play for every club and all that sort of stuff. And if it's best for their development, if it's best for the clubs, and it keeps things competitive, it keeps clubs in the competition, and it means that they're not spending a huge amount of money to get players in, then I think that that's a good thing, right? Because we're always talking about the finances, and it's the reality that a lot of these clubs don't have a lot of money. So whatever they can do to get players in to help them out, I think that's a good move. So
I think the tricky thing with external loans in the A-League, right, is it's very difficult to look overseas and find an appropriate step below what an A-League quality level would be, and find a desired place for players. Obviously, if we had a fully functioning second tier in Australia that played in the same season, maybe that would be
convenient,
help.
Wouldn't it?
Yeah, maybe after we build the pyramid a little bit more, and that'll be a bit more of an option. There's a little Easter egg in there for you paying attention at home. But look, hopefully that comes about, right? Because the loan system is something that Australian clubs have not been able to utilise very well. I think Sydney FC definitely leading the way. But if we go back to this lineup here, Perth against Western Sydney, of course, this is an interesting game because Jared Carluccio was excluded from the Perth Glory squad. And we now know, as David Zrulich actually confirmed post-game, well, he confirmed that he was leaving Perth Glory. We know that the destination is now the Western Sydney Wanderers. So former academy prospect at the Wanderers going back to Western Sydney, who have also announced the signing of former Socceroo Alex Gersbach back to the A-League after 9 years away on a 2.5-year deal. So some defensive reinforcements there. Another club, again, that really do need them at the back end.
Gersbach's a huge signing as well. I think that's a really good bit of business from the Wanderers. Perhaps as well that leaves only one club in the conversation for Thomas Deng, right?
I disagree.
You disagree? You think that they might still go for him?
Here's my wild hint, right? Two other names that we've talked about potentially coming back to the A-League are Thomas Deng and Milos Degenek in terms of centre-backs. I reckon one goes to Victory, the other goes to Wanderers. I don't know who's... Thomas Deng, because he's 27, played in the J-League the last couple of years, is probably the higher-rated one. Yeah. I think Victory, the link there will help. Yeah, so that's the 100%. Likely one for me, but I think one to each.
I can see that. Yeah, for sure. But I still think anyway that Gersbach's a very, very good signing for them.
Yeah,
they've really struggled defensively again this season. So any help that they can get there, and plenty of experience, of course, with him. Plus, it's experience in international leagues, and he's Australian, right? So it's not taking up a visa spot. Like it's a really good bit of business. And then Carluccio is just I feel like we're always referencing Moneyball on this podcast, but again, this reminds you of it, where they trade for a player who's on the team that they're playing that night, and he's like, oh. Yeah, and by the way, tell your relief pitcher to switch uniforms because he's playing for us tonight. And it's like, that kind of reminds me of this, where it's like, he was left out of the squad, and it's like, why is that? Oh, because he's signed for the opposition. Yeah. So no, two good bit of business, bits of business from the Wanderers. They're looking to be proactive, which makes sense given where they're at in the table right now compared to perhaps where they would have hoped they were at this point in the season, about halfway through, right? They're lagging a little bit behind, haven't quite found their feet. So they're addressing problems that they've got, and hopefully for them it means that things start to come together. I think that over the last few weeks, things have looked a little better for the Wanderers compared to how they started the season. But there's still a long ways to go for them to get into that sort of top 5, top 4 conversation that people were having about them at the start of the season. Obviously Mata hasn't quite had the impact that that a lot of people thought he might do. Nicholas Milanovic has been very hit or miss this season, so it's about just sort of starting to get things a little bit more solid. And I think that signing the likes of Carluccio, who's a really promising young player, and Alex Gersbach, who brings a lot of experience to that back line, I think that they can only help.
Yeah, very nice. All right, the other game was a 0-0 draw between Wellington Phoenix and Sydney FC. One thing I absolutely love out of this game, Alby Kelly healed, making his A-League debut. Per Andy Howe, just the third pair of twins to play together at A-League men's level. I think it was 5, including the NSL records as well. So Alby and Lucas, love it. The hyphenated surnames as well. It's just it's heritage moments there as well. He had a couple of really difficult touches early on. Like he got put under the pump and he handled them quite well. He might have been quite nervous though when he was lining up to defend a penalty, although it was waved away in the end by VAR. I think that was the right decision, right? Clearly playing the ball.
Yeah, I don't have too many grievances with it. It's one of those ones where you go, oh, thank God for VAR, like they got it right. So I'm not complaining about that one.
I did love like the yellow fever getting in on it, like he got the ball from the sideline, and also Ufuk Talay quite clearly asking the fourth official afterwards, who's VAR? Just wanted to know. Just write the name down, just so you have it in the receipts book, right? And then Leo Senna following it up a couple of minutes with an absolute howler of a dive as well. Well-deserved yellow card. Going back to the keeper thing on Wellington Phoenix, I know you and Will were saying that maybe Oluwayemi wasn't too much to blame. It seems like Chiefy didn't quite share your assessment there. But he's a keeper that, because that they've had Alby here for a little while, right? And because they couldn't find an Australian or New Zealand keeper with the right profile they went international with a visa slot to get Josh in. And not only that, after a few games, they liked what they saw and they signed him on. And we're seeing around the league, Patrick Beach is probably the best example of a young keeper who's come in and made a few errors now, but the coach has stuck by him. In this situation, Chiefy hasn't done that. It's probably been this critical mass now of a few things tallied up, and now Alby gets his chance. So it's hard because you can't, think about the sunk costs of, the 2-year contract that you've got Oluwayemi on, but it's a very fine line to walk, right?
Yeah, I think from a coaching perspective, it's a case of you've got to weigh up, backing your player and giving him confidence versus realistically how many games has he cost us now, and that's the thing, right? It's not like he's making mistakes in these 3-0, 4-0 losses and you go, well, either way we would have lost, it's not a huge deal. It's been late in the game, conceding equalizers, conceding winners, it's those absolutely killer mistakes that have been happening with Oluwayemi. So eventually it reaches a point where you've got to go, we can only back him for so long before he actually starts to derail our season. And if we've got an option who we think might be able to just stave that off for a little while, then why not back, the other guy, and give him some time and a chance to show what he's about. So it seems quite harsh, obviously, because they have backed him so far. And it seems like they do like him there, but you've got to be realistic from a coaching perspective as to what's best for your team, and not necessarily just what's best for the development of one player, which it's, it's a harsh thing to have to do, but that's why the coaches get paid the big bucks, relatively speaking. Maybe not so much in the A-League, but in football in general. So it's not an easy decision to have made. I also think that the signing of him as well, people are always going back to, well, why did they sign him in the first place? He's not been great. And you've got to remember as well, the whole thing around Poulsen, right? They probably were thinking, we've got our future goalkeeper secured right now in Poulsen. We're set. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, he leaves and goes to their rivals, who are just starting up for the first time this season. And
via a detour.
And it just go, well, what do we do now? It sort of becomes a little bit panicked. So, you mentioned, they couldn't quite find the caliber of keeper that they would have liked with an Australian or a New Zealand passport. Similar sort of situation, I guess, to a lot of the Australian clubs have struggled with keepers this season as well. Obviously, Victory managed to fill that gap with 2 signings, but in doing so took 2 keepers away that the Phoenix could have signed. So, it's it's a tough one for the Phoenix, but like I said, Chiefy's got to do what he thinks is best for the success of his side, and playing a keeper that's going to continually, drop you points in late phases of the game is probably not the best thing to do, especially now you're halfway through the season. It's not like it's been a small sample size, right? He's been given a decent chunk of the season, and he's not been able to quite perform at the level they expected. So, it's tough, but that's that. And, he's got another year still on his contract, so he's got the chance to fight and win that position back if he really wants it as well, which is the other side to look at it from too.
In terms of transfer watch areas for these two clubs, obviously we know David Ball has left the Phoenix. That opens up a visa slot. I saw someone talking on Twitter, I think it was Philip Rollo, perhaps, one of the Kiwi journalists, saying that potentially an attacking midfielder. Obviously, we know Marco Rose has been a big part of how they want to play. He hasn't been available for most of the season, so that seems like a quite logical place for the Phoenix to look into, and certainly makes a lot of sense with the departure of David Ball as well. Sydney, obviously, we talked about Pat Wood. I think the other story to watch here is Hayden Matthews. Sydney FC reportedly turned down 3 bids for him in the off season. I believe the number I heard was close to 2 million Australian dollars.
Yeah, a lot of money.
So since then, he's been doing well and he's become a Socceroo. Yeah. So your value only goes up when you debut for your national team. So obviously there's some contract length stuff here, which we'll talk more about Adelaide United later. It seems like the right avenue to go down. He's signed on until the end of the 26-27 season, so that's a fair chunk of contract. You have to buy him out. A bit of a wild tip, but he really could go close to breaking the Australian transfer record simply because of how young and well he's done already and the length of his contract. And I just think it's a really interesting story. Sydney FC, how much is the dollar line where they'd be willing to give up just a little bit of a chance of success at the end of the season to cash in on a good payday? I don't know.
Well, I think as well what's going to be another decisive factor in that is their negotiations with Popovic, because obviously he's on loan at the moment, and I think it ends this month. I think it was only a 6-month deal. I think so. They'll be looking to either extend it or offer him a contract. So I think if they can secure him, then they'll feel a little better in not letting Matthews go, but accepting a fee for Matthews. Whereas if they can't keep Popper around, then they're going to be perhaps a little bit more reluctant or be asking for a lot more money, because they'll then have to go out and get a couple of centre backs in, or at least one centre back in, to really sort of shore things up for them. So that's the other part to it. But I definitely agree that he could probably break the record at this point in time, especially given the figures that we have heard rumored to be about him. It's pretty impressive money for an Australian player. And obviously we're seeing it grow and grow and grow. And I think we're going to talk about Ariath Piol a bit later on as well, in terms of it. People are starting to pay attention to Australian footballers now and starting to offer decent money for players who not maybe necessarily haven't actually played enough to determine how good they actually are. Right. So Matthews, how good he is. He's played a lot of minutes this season, and he's been a key part of Sydney's defence. So fully with you that, especially with that length of contract, he could go for a lot of money.
Well, while we're there, let's go straight on to Ariath Piol. The rumour is over to the MLS. Real Salt Lake is the club for around about an $800,000 Australian fee, which, for MacArthur, considering he's played about 500 minutes of football for them, it's just proof that the last 12, 18 months hasn't been just a blip. These transfer numbers are going to continue to grow. I'll admit I was a little bit nervous about it. I was wondering how much of the cream have we skimmed off the top in terms of young players last season. But it seems like there's plenty of good talent coming through. And Hayden Matthews, obviously, and Ariath Piol are 2 very good examples of that. And if you're a club like MacArthur, you're getting close to $1 million for someone who's barely played any football for you, then you're laughing. Yeah.
I think that idea of taking the cream off the top, I think the opposite's happened in a way, in that we've just sort of pushed the bottom further up,
probably,
right? And so that these players that would have gone on free transfers 18 months ago are now going for over $500,000 Australian dollars, because of those high profile transfers that have been coming out of the league recently. Your Aaron Kunders, your Gauchis, people like Nisbet as well, right, going over. Craig Goodwin as well has been pretty decent over in Saudi Arabia, and he's gone over there a couple of times now for I think like $1 million each time as well. So it's those sorts of moves that it just slowly brings up the standard, the floor for Australian transfers. And I think that's what we're seeing here with Pure. I mean, there's no denying he's a great player, right? And we've seen the talent that he does have, but it's a case of, is that a flash in the pan thing? And it's just, he's the new young kid that, is going to go out there and burn defenders, and then they'll figure him out and they'll figure out how to stop him. Or is he the real deal? You can't really tell because he's only played 500 minutes. So it seems like a bit of a risky move for Real Salt Lake to be like, yeah, let's go for it. But you've also got to remember, this is an American club. They have money to just throw around. So for them, this is nothing, right? It's worth taking a gamble on it. So,
and a league that is interested in Australians at the moment as well.
100%. And is starting to really rise in quality as well, just around the board. I think it's like, I could be completely wrong, but I think there's only maybe like 5 teams in the MLS that in the like FIFA rankings or whatever it is, are like below the top A-League sides or something like that, right? So it's like it's a clear like couple of steps.
That's above. A very niche bit of knowledge. Well
done. I think it's something like that. I could be wrong, but it's a really specific small number of clubs that are sort of A-League level, and the rest are a clear step or two above that. So it's a good move for player development as well. I wish him the best. Obviously, he's a South Australian product as well, so that's another one in our tally. Technically, we'll count it. Spent a lot of his youth here, but no, like I said, tremendous player, and I think it's a good sign that if agents, clubs, players start targeting the right sides, there's a lot of money here to be made. American sides are obviously one of those because, like I said, they've got the money. They're going to be interested in the caliber of players that will be coming out of the A-League because they are a couple of steps above, but it's still not so far removed that it's like, well, why are you signing this guy who's clearly not good enough, right? It seems like it's a good mix there. They're starting to grow a bit like it is here in the A-League. So, no, I think that maybe this is going to be one of those moves that really sort of cracks open the market, perhaps over in America for A-League transfers. Who knows? Obviously, we'll see, but it's a huge payday for MacArthur, right? Because he signed this guy and thought, oh, we might have a decent little player on our hands here, a good project. And now they're selling it off a few months later for 800,000. So, good on everybody involved, and best of luck to him.
Tell you what, though, that solo run down the left wing, I forgot who he scored that goal against, but that kind of Gareth Bale touch on run on the outside and then come in. Very good. Best of luck to him over in America. Let's go to Brisbane. We talked about Henry Hoare coming back from a K-League loan, which is a unique thing to do. But, Ruben Zadkovic has been speaking highly of him and his potential impact in the squad in the second half of the season. Speaking of Ruben Zadkovic, we've heard some more out of the Brisbane Roar camp about his status as coach. Kaz Patafta did an interview with Channel 10 during the week. This is what he had to say.
We currently support our technical staff, which includes Ruben. We need a level of stability in the Roar. We've had a lot of changeover in personnel, last season included, and I was involved in that as well. So we have to make decisions with a clear mind in an objective fashion. But as anyone knows, and as Ruben knows, and any manager in football, nothing's ever certain. So Ruben has our support. We're continuing to analyse our results. And of course, time will tell, but Ruben has our support at the moment.
So Patafta currently supports his technical staff. Nothing's ever certain. Ruben has our support at the moment. It certainly seems like he's softening his stance.
It's even... This is just reaffirming my position even more, that statement that they made a few weeks ago, they don't have any support in him.
I'm more with you now.
Like the bit where he says, oh, we're supporting our technical staff, and there's a little break and he's like, which includes Ruben. It's like, it was almost like he's an afterthought there. And then the bit about the results, as any manager knows, you've got to look at it from a results perspective. And there's like, that's that's the big one there. That's the nail in the coffin
Yeah.
for him, because he's not been getting results. They're the worst side in the competition by far so far. I mean, Perth have managed to get wins. They've beaten Auckland. You mentioned that good bit of commentary. They look like a football team. Brisbane do not look like that at the moment, and haven't done all season. So yeah, I'm still fully on board with the fact that the board are just looking for any reason at this point to make things easier in their decision to get rid of him.
So it was interesting listening to A-League off air. I think it was last week actually, when they who'd they have on? Eric Partaloo.
Yeah.
And Robbie was saying that some of his mail coming out of the club was that, that management pair of Kaz Patafta and I forget the other one, but they went to the board and, said, I know we wanted stability in this role, but look at the results. We haven't won a game. And we talked about this probably a month ago now. They're heading into a stretch of Perth Glory at home, which they lost, Western United, just as they were kind of building up this good run of form, which they lost 1-0. Then a loss at home to the Mariners, a loss at home to the Jets as well. And then the City game was always going to be a struggle, right? But that was supposed to be their window with, specifically the Jets and the Mariners at home. If you're ever going to win
some points,
come on, guys, after losing to Perth at home as well. So that all of a sudden is a mountain of poor performances against other poor performing teams. The argument has to be building, and I know that stability is there, but stability and just losing every game doesn't seem to be beneficial to a football club. So I said at that point, if you're going to get rid of him, you have to do it now, or you have to keep him for the rest of the year. But this is struggle street now for the Roar. Serious struggle street.
I think they've made their bed here. They've got to stick it out at this point, because it's just an awkward position to be in, and they've kept just being non-committal about the whole thing all this time. And now it's coming back to bite them, because it's getting to the point where everybody's getting so critical that Patafta's having to come out and do an interview, on Channel 10 about it. And, it's starting to get to that point where alarm bells are fully ringing, if they haven't been for a while already. So yeah, it's tough. And you've got to think of it from, in terms of the players as well and the squad, like the what they're going through must be really difficult to understand from an outsider's perspective, right? Because you're not getting results. You're hearing all this stuff about how the board is backing the coach that's not getting you anywhere. There's rumors that perhaps the locker room environment isn't all that great. It's just like, it is, everything there seems to be going wrong and is a bit rotten at the moment for Brisbane. So yeah, I think that this stance of being non-committal and being a bit passive towards it is it's come back to bite them now. And the fact that they've pushed it and pushed it and pushed it means that they've got to just keep pushing it now until the end of the season, and then just go fresh again next year, which is going to then, speaking of push their project back a year. So it's really tough for Brisbane.
One thing that Kaz Patafta and Zach Anderson have been very good at since they've come in is dictating the narrative of the Brisbane Roar Football Club. And I think my little spidey senses are tingling with this interview, because I think they're laying down the groundwork for the eventual sacking of Ruben Zadkovic. Now, I feel like that, I don't know, just alarm bells are going off in my head. I feel like that decision's been made now. And you've got Sydney FC at home against the Roar this weekend. That has potential to be a whitewash. And if it is, that might be the trigger. Because he couldn't have left the door any more open, right?
Yeah.
Like, literally, the quotes, currently supporting our technical staff. Ruben has our support at the moment. Like, he couldn't be any more clear that there is the option to get rid of it.
It's gone, yeah.
So maybe a month ago, it was, we have to think about this, but they have a chance in the next few weeks. They've missed that chance. Maybe now is the time. But yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see, because they're a team that hasn't won a game all season. So something
could they be?
change.
Has a team ever not won a game in an A-League season? Maybe the New Zealand Knights
No,
back in the day, but
surely the Knights won something.
Because this is genuinely one of the worst seasons I think we've ever seen. Like, it's so bad, and do you want that record against your club? That's
I don't know, just for the one game of the new manager bounce, right? To get a win somewhere to block it.
Yeah.
Anyway, all right. More, I'm sure we'll be talking about the Brisbane Roar plenty in the next couple of weeks. Let's go over to Adelaide, a new 3-year contract extension for Jay Barnett. Jacob, he's been really solid in that midfield since returning to his hometown club through to the end of the 27-28 season now. Seems like another pretty good bit of business for Adelaide. As we were talking about, they're a club now that is favouring these longer-term deals. I feel like even 3 years ago, that's a 1 or maybe a 1.5 year extension, something like that. But 3 here for Barnett, which is great for him and the club.
And well-deserved as well. Carl mentioned it towards the start of the season that it feels like he's a new signing because he's obviously spent all of last season out injured. And it was clear from the get-go that he was going to be a big part of Cole's plans moving forwards, right? The moment he was signed, basically, he came into the starting 11, playing in that 6. And I've always been a big fan of him since I've seen him play for Adelaide. I just, he's so intelligent off the ball in defensive phases of play. Like, he reads the game really well, makes crucial interceptions. He's that sort of real rock pivot sort of 6, which has then allowed Ethan Alagic to have such a good season, right, to work around that. So, they found a really good pairing there, and Alagic himself is on a really long contract. Was it 5 years? I think he's on. Barnett for 3. So, that's Adelaide's midfield set up for the next few seasons. So
love what they're doing there.
Yeah, exactly. If there's any signs of success for Adelaide this season, they could then go on and continue to repeat that, because it's been the midfield that's been the rock and the heart of this side. But yeah, Jay Barnett's been a tremendous player for Adelaide. He got his chance at the Victory and just couldn't perform, right? And that's the thing, is that he then got almost sort of a second life to come back to Adelaide. Obviously, he's from Adelaide originally, play for the club he grew up supporting, and he's actually been able to turn that into success. Even
that's what happens, right?
With the injuries,
you try your stuff in Melbourne and you can't hack it, so you go back to Adelaide, the smaller town club,
and you're suddenly one of the best midfielders in the league. Yeah. You could say, they're coming back to the smaller club, but what's the standings looking like at the moment?
Yeah, just trying to spice up the rivalry.
That's right. But no, I mean, Adelaide are definitely doing things right in terms of signing their youngsters and their talented players onto longer term contracts. Brisbane are talking about stability. That's the best way to do it, right? Is to sign your good players on and make sure that they're around for a little while so that you can build something. Not necessarily backing your coach who's not getting results. So 2 different visions of stability, and we can see which one's working at the moment.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, they're already playing really well, and they've got a bunch of these young players signed up on 3 to 5 year contracts. You got to be feeling pretty good right now if you're a Reds fan heading into a sold out regional rivalry on Saturday night. On the other side of that game, the big question is Mitch Langerak. Now, we talked about this at length, but this is officially the week that he is allowed to play. So I just want a quick tip, maybe a 1-line explanation. Does he start straight away against Adelaide?
Common sense says no, but as we've seen from Arthur Dillers so far, he seems to like making changes to things. So maybe the opportunity to make a change, he's going to go, "Ooh, I like this," and he'll put Langerak in. So I think that common sense says you stick with Duncan because he's been very, very good this season. But knowing Arthur Dillers and he likes to chop and change things, it's not beyond the realms of possibility.
I think Tommy Orff said on Total A-Leagues that Mitch Langerak is one of the best keepers in Asia, which he clearly is. But I just, only from the perspective of what does it say to your other players if you're just going to bring someone in straight away. So I think play Duncan while he's still doing well, i.e. he'll start against Adelaide. And if he has a poor game, Mitch will take it for the rest of the season from there. I think that's how we've got to play it.
And this is a chance as well, this game. Like, it's a chance to really endear yourself to Victory supporters as well. Absolutely. If you have a good game here. So for Duncan, if he has a blinder against Adelaide in Adelaide, Victory fans will love him forever, and it will just cement his spot even more. So I think that the smart thing to do, is to play Duncan and hope he has a blinder. Worst case scenario is he ships 3 and you've got Langerak there, So I think that's the smart move.
And you've got an easy excuse for it as well. No
exactly.
Sam commented on one of our recent podcasts. I do still feel, as Jacob said last week, Ben Gariccio coming in for Shamoon has seemingly linked to every Western every goal Western concede at the moment. Garuccio doing a lot of pointing and getting caught up the pitch. However, credit for his delivery. Perhaps he should be reinvented as an 8 or wing where he can deploy those passes, direct traffic, and not mess up the defence. Do we have ourselves our own little Trent Alexander-Arnold debate? Brilliant going forward, world-class delivery, maybe not quite getting organised as he should be at the back. But as we've heard Jurgen Klopp talk about at countless ends, that's a trade-off you were consciously making, right? So is Ben Garuccio the Trent Alexander of the A-League?
It's an interesting debate, and it's a good comparison, actually, because what we normally see is when players start getting to sort of Garuccio's age, the opposite happens, right? It's those wingers that transform into fullbacks rather than fullbacks that transform into more attacking-minded players. So a little bit of a change there, but it does seem like, he's not unstabilized the defense, but there are moments where you think he can do better there. He's leaving a lot of space in behind. Same sort of criticisms that a lot of fullbacks across the league cop. But in Garuccio's case, it just so happens that when that happens, Western tend to concede. So,
and he probably is being instructed by Aloisi for a lot of that.
100%. Right. When you've got a player like Garuccio who has that delivery from wide areas, who can run at his man, he's really good on the ball, good range of passing. You want to get him on the ball in attacking areas. It just makes sense. And the trade-off, like Klopp always says, is that you're then going to be a little bit more vulnerable defensively. So, is the solution that you reinvent him as a winger or an 8, or do sort of like Adelaide have done with Dylan Parias, right? Where he's not a fullback, he's not a winger. You sort of play him in this wide holding role, and you get him on the ball out wide isolated. That could work. Or the opposite is you keep him as a fullback, but you supplement that with, better defensive options, right? It's January now. There's the chance for Western to go out there and perhaps nab somebody who can, on that left-hand side of the defence, really control things and be a much more, I suppose, leading presence in the back line when Garuccio is up front and leaving space in behind. So there's a couple of options there. I don't think that it's necessarily the be-all and end-all. And so, you've got to weigh up for Aloisi whether it might even be a match-by-match thing, right? Where you think we could be under a lot of strain here. Let's go with the guy who's more solid defensively versus, well, this game could open up more. That's where Ben can do a lot of damage, can get in these good areas and put the ball into the box. So, it's a tough one to consider, but I think that it's good. It's a good sign, actually, that Western have these options, right? They've got the youngster who's a really good defending fullback, and they've got Garuccio, who's, the veteran. He's really good going forwards, and he presents options there. So, maybe it is a case of Trent Alexander-Arnold in the A-League, but his name is Ben Garuccio. It'll be interesting to see how they go about it in the coming rounds. I think Garuccio will just keep starting, to be honest, when you've got a player like him, that sort of experience, that leadership in a side that needs it, right? Because we're always talking about how young it is and they need all the experience they can get. And that's what, has sort of coincided with their success, is those more experienced players stepping up, your Ibasukis, your Thurgates. Garuccio can be one of those as well. So I think that they'll stick with him. But it's good to at least have that option defensively, to have Shamoon coming in if Garuccio starts to become a bit of a liability.
Just going back to Mitch Langerak very quickly, some breaking news for you. I'm just seeing Joey Lynch has written a piece. He did a press conference with Arthur Dillers today. Apparently, there is still a little bit of paperwork to be done for Mitch Langerak to get clearance. As much as this deal has been done for a while now and the window is open, there still needs to be some technicalities, let's say, ticked off between the two federations of the transfer. So as of this afternoon, he is not available for selection. That's Thursday afternoon.
And I'm presuming he'd still be in Japan as well. I doubt he'd have gotten on a flight to
Melbourne. No, he is in Melbourne because
he
was in the stands last week, I think.
Right. Okay.
And was set to resume training. So he is. The other little bit of information in here, and this was reported on For Fuck's Sake and the A-League off air as well, is that Jason Geria's transfer over to Japan has reportedly become without any money going the other way. So whatever the circumstances of that deal are, that does seem strange.
Do you know the other player that has left the team that Geria is going to? Just so happens to be Thomas Deng. Perhaps it's a swap deal, right? Maybe that's why there's no money involved.
How would if he's off contract?
Player for player. Yeah. Yeah, that's
Although
true.
he's not off contract until the end of January,
End
though.
of
I don't know if that makes
end of the
maybe helps him come a couple of games
yeah,
sooner.
yeah. I don't know,
I
but
don't know. Odd.
tinfoil hat on. Maybe that's a little bit of why there's no money involved. Just
Interesting.
lends to the theory that Deng's coming back to Melbourne.
All right, there we go. Stirring the pot just a little bit more. Let's take our eye towards the other games this week. We've seen some of the ins and outs come through for the teams. Matthew Leckie is back for Melbourne City, which is a big in terms of the original rivalry as well. Reno Piscopo is out of the squad. He's being managed, is the official line. We've actually seen him excluded, not always from squads, but a couple of teams in kind of odd situations. The first one was back in Unite round. So maybe he's just dealing with we know he's had injury trouble in the past, of course. So maybe he's just dealing with some little niggly things here and there. Hopefully clears up the way for Nishan Valupale to start his first game since returning from injury as well, which I think would be big for the victory in this one. Jacob, let's get a burning question for our weekend look.
Yes. The Phoenix, Wellington, how low can they go? It just seems like they're in a bit of free fall at the moment. They can't seem to get things going. It's not the Wellington that people were hoping for. It's not the Wellington we saw last season. We've spoken about what could be their issues. Is it tactics? Is it players? Is it that they've got a bunch of injuries? Obviously, Rufer is out. That's a huge loss for them. He's such a key part of their midfield and ball progression. How low does it get for Wellington? Is it the lows of those early 2010 seasons where they were quite poor, or is it just a bump in the road? I guess we'll see. But who is it that they're playing this week? It's MacArthur. So that's a team that have been quite inconsistent this season.
On a Monday, though.
It's on a Monday, yeah, and they've got to go away as well. So that's the other thing. But then Paletti talking in the predictions video, they were going on about how Wellington seem to do well away to MacArthur. So, you never know. It's a chance for them, but it'll be interesting to see how that one goes.
My burning question is, can the Mariners take advantage of the Wanderers cross-country travel? So playing in Perth on a Tuesday night, and then what did we say? Are they playing Friday or Saturday? I can't remember. Either or. I think it might even be Friday. That's
Friday? Yeah, Friday.
Friday night fixture. So having to travel back from Perth with just a 3-day rest is tough. So, look, before we talked about this being a good time to play the Wanderers before they get these defensive reinforcements in, obviously the window is open, so they've signed now. Are they fit? Are they introduced into the squad to be able to play? Who knows? But can the Mariners take advantage? That's my burning question. Let's go a worst case scenario.
Worst case scenario is that the new signings disrupt Perth. I say that like Perth have been in a tremendous run of form. They have been relative to what it's been for them for the rest of the season, but it seems like maybe they're finding their groove a little bit. And we all know that new signings can sometimes come in and not particularly help out in that department. So I think that would be a bad thing for Perth, because it seems like on paper these are really good signings, right?
Yeah.
If they come in and Perth start capitulating again, that would be a real worst case scenario for them when it seems like they've turned a page. So yeah, hopefully not, but that was definitely a worst case scenario.
My worst case scenario is that Western start their Tarningit run with a loss against the Newcastle Jets. They've only played 3 games out there at their new base so far this season. That's half of the season now. So they're coming into a lot of games at home, 4 of the next 5 as well.
Yeah.
So I think this is a phase of the season where they're really going to want to carry this run of good form that they've had the last month or so into a really strong home run. John Aloisi talking on Total A-League, make it into a fortress, the classic home ground lines, but specifically in this phase of the season, that's a big thing for Western, especially with where they're at a football club right now. So you want to get off to a good start, and losing against the Jets would not be that. Ping from distance.
Brisbane get a point? I don't know. Like it just, it seems like that's pretty unlikely at this point in time, especially against Sydney. But then, conversely, that would be the most Brisbane thing to happen at this point is, they like snatch a win from Sydney or something. And then it's like, oh, it's not that massive loss we were hoping for. We can't sack Sadkovic off the back of that. So, that would be quite funny as well. So, yeah, I think that, maybe they get a point or something.
My ping from distance, and this, I don't know how ping you think this is, but Victory break their winless run in the original rivalry. You look at the form, obviously, Victory haven't won in 5. Adelaide have been going to gangbusters. Adelaide definitely the favourites at home. There's no doubt about that. But there's something about Victory in these big games that when they're expected to win big games, they often come in underdone. But when they're seemingly the underdogs in these big games, they rise to the occasion. And so I think with a very hostile crowd, with Bruno up top barking orders around, I think that's the kind of game that these players get up for. So, my ping is that Victory get it done.
Yeah, I think it's pretty likely, to be honest. Adelaide have,
you would say that, though.
No, Adelaide have been pretty bad at home this season.
Also, also Adelaide at home, conceding like
very, very good away, but at home, big crowd. It's exactly the recipe for Adelaide to not turn up and not play well. I don't know what it is about the side and the coaches that they just can't get it going in these big games at home. So, it certainly seems like the Victory can get it done here. And I'd actually back them to do it and get an upset. And it would suck all the energy out of what's happening in Adelaide at the moment with United and, the fans that are starting to come in and, to the point where, the game sold out by Tuesday. It was, Thursday today we're recording, where the only tickets available are those that are resale by members who aren't going to show up. There's a lot of desire to watch Adelaide football at the moment. And I think that this game, it has all the makings of Victory being able to come to Adelaide. Away bays sold out. It's going to be a great atmosphere, and they can steal the 3 points, I reckon.
Going to be brilliant. All right, that's all we have on the rundown. I've done a quick little refresh of my Twitter feed. I don't see any breaking transfers coming in.
Nothing crazy.
If anything happens late on Thursday, we're going to miss it. I'm sorry. We'll talk about it next week on Tuesday. But that will do for this episode of the Round Ball Australia podcast. Jacob Stevens, thank you. London is red.
It sure is. A pleasure to be on, as always.
All right. We'll be back on Tuesday for a review of, what did we say it was, round 14 in the A-League? Something like that.
It's round something.
All of these midweek rounds have messed it up a little bit, but there is A-League. We will be here to talk about it. Thank you very much for listening at home. We appreciate your company. As always, we'll see you then. Goodbye.